Welcome to the 28th episode of Impact Media Presents. I am your host, Kelly Redmond, and Executive Director of Impact Media and Entertainment Coalition. And today we have a very special guest. And while we're waiting for her to join us, as you know, this Friday is the March on Washington, and it's the 57th anniversary. And there are going to be live activities in Washington, D.C. There are also virtual events that are happening in cities across the country, and Impact Media is one of the proud supporting organizations that is sponsoring the event and partnering to host. And I want to share with you some of those details about our event coming up on this Friday. Uh, we will be starting off with a caravan from noon to 2, and there are more details available where we're going to be meeting. It's at the Rouse off of La Brea and Obama Boulevard, and then we'll caravan over to Leimert Park. And then from there, we will actually have a rally in Leimert Park, and there'll be a few booths set up. There will be voter registration taking place, and during the rally, there'll be some speakers. There'll be speakers sharing information about the propositions that are going to be voted on, among other things. And I just received a call, so just bear with me a moment and let me just check and see what's happening with our special guest today. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. So our special guest is running a little bit behind, so we're going to fill the space because if we don't, we'll get kicked off of StreamYard. So just bear with us. This hasn't happened before. I will share a few more details about the event that's going on locally in Los Angeles. Uh, I want to read off some of the other partnering and sponsoring organizations, which we planned to do on the show last week with Pastor Smart. Uh, so the LA sponsoring organizations are the African American Cultural Center, the Association of Black Social Workers, the Baptist Ministers Conference of Los Angeles, Bend the Arc, the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance, the Black Jewish Justice Alliance, Black Lives Matter LA, Brotherhood Crusade, Clergy for Black Lives, Crenshaw Subway Coalition, Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, our organization Impact Media and Entertainment Coalition, the Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace, K.W. Lee Center for Leadership, the LA County Federation of Labor, Los Angeles Black Pride, National Action Network LA, and National Action Network is the host of the March on Washington live in Washington. The National Council of Negro Women, SoCal area, Sanctuary of Hope, SEIU 2015, SEIU 721, and the Women's March LA. And Emmy, who is the founder of the Women's March LA, joined us on the show last Thursday. I did want to share that later in the evening, Pacific Standard Time, between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., we will have a virtual town hall meeting that you can tune into live on Facebook at SCLC SoCal, SCLC SOCAL. And we have a lineup of incredible speakers, participants. There will be tributes to the 3 civil rights giants that we lost earlier this year, starting with Dr. Lowry, Reverend C.T. Vivian, as well as Congressman John Lewis. There will be opportunities for those who are interested in volunteering. You can participate in the caravan from 10 to 12. You can also, uh, there's they're going to need volunteers helping with voter registration. And if you need to register to vote or complete your census, you can actually do that on site as well. And as we're waiting for our special guest, I would also just like to take a moment to say thank you. I want to thank all of our volunteers, my board members, our sponsors, our donors who have kept us going for the past 7 years. I'm so grateful for all that you've done to support me and my vision for Impact Media. And it's really exciting that during this really critical time that we've been able to step up and provide programming that we've wanted to plan, which is on a national level, using media and entertainment for social change. So without further ado, I see that my special guest, Dr. Bernice King, is in the waiting room. So I am going to bring her in and let's give her a warm welcome. Hi, Dr. King. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Kelly. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you since the Image Awards a few years ago when we were.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So
Yeah,
yes,
yes, good to see you.
a different world, of course.
Absolutely. A completely different world, but same issues, right?
Same issues, yes, same issues,
Same battles,
definitely.
but definitely making strides. Just wanted to, and I thank you. We've been wanting to have you on since we kicked off this series. Where do we go from here? With bringing together our national leaders and looking to bring our national women leaders into the conversation, since there were some scheduling conflicts and so much going on in the world in the latter part of, from June and July. So thank you for joining us, especially at this critical time as we're all gearing up to celebrate the 57th commemoration of the March on Washington. So the timing is just perfect. Would love to just kind of check in with you and see, and how are you doing on time? Do we need to have a hard stop in the next 20 minutes, or can we go
Probably
the full?
30 minutes around. What time is it now? 4:40.
Yes.
Yeah, around 5:15.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So I won't cut us short. So for the most part, the way we typically start off the interviews is just kind of checking in with everyone, see how you're doing. One of the questions we ask is, how you've been in quarantine, how people have been creative during this time of quarantine. How has it been for you and your team at the King Center?
I wouldn't call it creative because everybody's had to kind of figure this out using similar technology, which we
Yes,
have done,
yes,
and then trying to transition into how we present some of our programming virtually, which has gone pretty well thus far. It's not the same. I will say there's something about
yes,
being in person that is very powerful when you're able to truly draw upon the energy in the room,
absolutely.
and be able to be much more interactive. Those of us in the nonprofit world, we don't have the funds to really create dynamic virtual experiences. But we're doing what we have to do to help people shift their thinking. I think a large part of where we are today, especially in light of the pandemic that's been compounded by the social justice issues that were already there,
Yes,
but now have come even more to the surface with some of the recent killings that just as
yes,
early as a couple of days ago.
yes,
It's how do we really get people to pause, because I think this whole pandemic was about a recalibration. Um,
yes,
I as a spiritual person, I can't just look at things in the natural realm. and say, you know,
Absolutely.
pandemic has happened. We've got to address it from a health standpoint and a safety standpoint. I've also got to ask, okay, God, what is this about? What are you
Absolutely.
saying to us? And what is it that we need to do? And I honestly believe that we have been on such a pathway of self-destruction as a world because our
Yes.
value systems are off. We've become so consumed in materialism and profiteering, and we've lost sight of people and humanity
Yes.
and things that are just and equitable. And so this divine interruption was supposed to be
Yes.
us reassessing and recommitting ourselves to new ways of engaging and working hard on deconstructing the things that have not been on solid footing. I mean, unfortunately, um, after 400 years, 400 plus years,
Yeah.
um, um, you know, of dealing with systemic oppression,
Yeah.
and then looking at a country that supposedly was founded on the basis of equality, we've got to do some hard work of admitting that that foundation was faulty, because
Yes.
at the beginning, the meaning of equality did not include Black people 100% as human. And so we can't go from that beginning. We have to kind of start again. And I remember my
Yes.
father delivered a message about America being born again, and I think that's where we are today. We have to
Yes.
be born again in terms of, you know, what is the collective value system that we are going to move forward, and what does that mean in
Yes.
totality? Not just spouting out words,
Yes.
but we have to talk about now, what do these words really mean? Who are we speaking of when we talk about those words? Which today we're in a much more diverse society, so it has to include everybody. And
Yes.
what are we going to do to correct and adjust for the damage that has been done?
Yes. Very, very prolific words. You're absolutely right. You know, when this whole, pandemic hit, uh, it was pretty clear that, that time had come, because I created Impact Media and Entertainment Coalition to use media and entertainment for social change, and knowing that media and entertainment needed to be a part of, the solution. And people didn't quite even understand when the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
and there was, nowhere to go, and they ran out of content they wanted to see. Then people started getting what we were trying to do, and that's when we actually launched this live stream and are able to bring, voices to, people that we typically may not have access to, from, all
Right.
across the country and all over the world.
World, yes.
And it's been pretty incredible to be able to do that. As you may remember, I actually lived in Atlanta in the early 90s. I was motivated to be there for a few reasons, but when I was in college, Dr. C.T. Vivian did his race awareness workshop at Drake
Mm-hmm.
University. And he's like, "You want to do this, don't you, Sister Delta?" I'm like, "I do." And we were able to
Mm-hmm.
keep in touch. And one of the first places that I went was the King Center, and went through the Kenyan nonviolence training. And you were one of the trainers when I was
Oh, wow.
in it. Yes. And remember being there doing, organizing work and training with the NCNW and the People's Institute. And I mean, so we've been doing this work, for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad to see you, at the helm. And we love to hear more about, what you're doing, why you do this work, you know, because even though you had the inspiration of your parents, you have a driving force within you that's all your own, because you don't have to do this work. So we want to hear why you do this work and how we can support you, and the work of the King Center, no matter where we are in the world, because it's still important work. And we appreciate you, your family, for the sacrifice of, allowing us to have, you know, your dad, uh, and to, you know, all, and it cost him his life, unfortunately, for the sacrifice of our freedom and our justice and equality. So, you know, we can't thank you enough, you and your family.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you know, I'm committed to really creating a just, humane, peaceful, and equitable world. Um, Not because my parents were committed to it.
Right,
That certainly has influenced it,
right.
um, but because of, you know, my personal relationship with Christ,
Yes,
and it flows out of my belief that at the center of love are all of those things. I mean,
yes,
you can't fully breathe in and breathe out love,
yes,
and exist and live in this world, and turn a deaf ear and close your eyes on inhumanity. And so that's what really drives me. And
yes,
so, you know, my commitment is that I would try to open the eyes of so many people and their understanding, more importantly, of what I
yes,
believe is a more excellent way of challenging these injustices, because I know the instinctual thing, with human beings, is to do what comes with reflex. You know, if somebody offends me, if somebody hurts me, if somebody violates me, I want to give that same treatment back. And while it feels good, the reality is, you know, as Daddy said, you cannot put out hate with hate. You can't drive darkness out with darkness. Only light can do that, and it's so
absolutely.
real, because I've seen over and over again when people have tried to resolve or solve or address injustices, and they've sought to do it through violent means, that it never has really created the pathway towards a real lasting solution. And in studying the movement that my father led, it took me time to get there. I mean, I was not forced there. It was a journey, because
Hmm.
I didn't always study them. I knew about it always from the beginning,
Yes,
you know, of my childhood, because my mother shared a lot with us. As you said, we were in and around the King Center. But it's only really been, if I might be frank, since my mother passed, that I realized
mm,
that now I have a higher responsibility to understand that movement and the role that it played, and to ensure that everything that they were trying to do, people fully understand and can, you know, incorporate it in today's times to address the issues that we are faced with today, the injustices that we're faced with today. So I moved from more of the frontline activism, where
hmm.
you're protesting and demonstrating. I've done all of that. Not that I may never be a part of that again, but there's so many roles that people have to play
Exactly.
in a movement, and I see my role as trying to help to educate and train people on the way of thinking, and the way of
Absolutely.
engaging these issues, and strategy, more importantly, because
Absolutely.
nonviolence is strategic.
Very much
It
so.
is. It's. I think people have confined it to this physical
Hmm.
aspect, where, you know, you're just allowing yourself to be beat upside the head. It's such so much more than that.
So
There's
much more.
planning. There's organizing. There's strategizing
The
the
negotiate.
attack. Yeah, and the negotiation, and how you do that.
Exactly.
When you do that, um, it's a very thought uh, thoughtful process,
Yes,
that is not all, it's not easy, and it
it's
involves
not.
all of your being. So you are resisting, and more importantly, you are resisting compliance with an unjust system. You don't cooperate with it. That's the first thing in nonviolence. It's
Yes,
non-cooperation with evil and injustice. And I'm
yes,
not going to cooperate with it. And I'm going to attack it this way. I'm going to have strategies that even put pressure in certain places, to get you to come to a table of reason, to understand that these set of things must change. And if they don't, we'll continue to resist in that way. We'll continue to create strategies where more and more people will join us. And if necessary, we will have to use economic means to do that. Well, we call it, economic withdrawal, but it has to be all strategic. You can't be flippant with it. Right. Because it undermines the process. So it is really something that is the tactic and a tool to use at set times. So that's part of the work that I see me doing now.
Yes.
And as I said, if there comes a time when I feel like I need to be out right there in the midst of it from that vantage point, I will do that. But I think my calling now is at the other level.
Absolutely. I used to say growing up that I was born outside of my era, that I thought I should have been on the front lines, with Dr. King and CT and Andrew, John Lewis, but there wasn't. We marched against apartheid. There were a few marches there that had a chance to participate in,
and went to jail. I went to jail a couple of times dealing with apartheid.
I haven't gone to jail, and at my age, I'm not necessarily looking to. But I actually, my daughter, I have an 18, almost 19-year-old Jada, student at Pepperdine. We actually went to one of the protests, for Black Lives Matter here, at the early stages. But I said, I'm giving them one, especially one in a pandemic. But I know that my work has been, strategic and, behind the scenes and bringing people together, and collaborating, and the strategy part of the work and connecting, people to the resources to know how they can, get involved. And that was one reason behind this whole series, because when the cities were on fire on May 28th, all across the country, and I'm hearing the helicopters zooming directly over me. I mean, I literally stood on my balcony, the helicopter was right above me, and I'm hearing the sirens, and it was just, it's still going on, here in LA. And I knew that I had to do something in that moment. As tired and exhausted as I was then, I scheduled this broadcast with a professor on the East Coast who gave, an incredible chronicle of the historical context around why Black people protest, going back to the 1600s. And it was phenomenal. And that's what launched this series. But I was like, we have to show people another way. The protesting is important. Now the looters took over and turned it into something else. But there are so many other ways to be involved and engaged in social justice and social action. And we all have to work together.
And that's the key phrase, as you said, work together. I think the problem today is there's so many moving parts and so many moving efforts that my hope and prayer is that one day there will be this Nehemiah coordinated effort. When Nehemiah had to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, everybody was working in their area of strength and concentration and focus, but it was all tied to the whole and working synergistically toward the ultimate goal. Sometimes I think we have a lot going on and some efforts undermine other efforts or compete with other efforts, and we haven't done a great job of figuring out what my father challenged us to do, which was discover. That's a key word to look at. Discover how to organize our strengths into compelling power. And so, people have strengths in different areas. And you may be concerned about a certain area, but you may not have a certain gift or talent in that area. And so you may need to defer to somebody else in that area of strength, and you operate in your strength and see how you complement the other organization. I'm speaking organizationally now. And then put the strategy together from that area, from that place of strength. So that's my cry out right now is,
absolutely.
Hey, I like the passion. I like the determination. I'm with the nonviolence resistance, but can we figure out, it's not just unity, it's deeper than unity. It's
Much
really
more.
doing the hard work of, what is my strength as an organization? What is your strength as an organization?
Yes.
Where are organizations even duplicative in terms of their strengths, and how can they align better together with those strengths to fortify, and how do those organizations with those like strengths combine with other organizations and
Absolutely.
other strengths that are needed for the whole approach.
Well, I think we need
And
to
that's
pull
ego
together.
work. That's ego work. That's
Yeah.
working on our
Well,
egos.
well, we got to do it. We're gonna have to roll these sleeves up and figure it out. You touched on something that's so important. You know, working in our strengths. I am a firm believer in building strengths-based cultures, and there are tools out there to help us do this. I don't know if
Yes.
you or your team has done a Strengths Finder assessment. Are you familiar with Strengths
No, I'm
Finder?
not. Let me write that down, because
Don't
I
worry
need to.
about writing it down. I'm going to follow up
Okay.
with you. I've
Okay. I
actually
appreciate that.
created some tools to use in addition to the things that they have in place to help organizations determine the individual strengths of the employees or whoever's affiliated, the stakeholders, as well as looking at it from a holistic standpoint for the organization to know the organization's strengths and where they're lacking so that they can build teams and cultures that are strengths based. But if we
And
could
that's
do
and that's the
that,
basis from which my
yes,
father really worked. I mean, he was
yes,
able to galvanize a strong team of leaders who had different strengths. And some of them worked directly within
yes,
SCLC, and others were part of other organizations or affiliates of SCLC. And that's
yes,
how they were able to align and work together on an ultimate strategy in tackling segregation in America. And if everybody talks about the progress of that movement, and some people criticize it as that it didn't accomplish much, or it left this behind. And I found first comfort in my mother's words that said, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation, which suggests that no one
yes,
generation is going to be able to conquer the monstrous injustices that we are faced with, but each
yes,
generation will have its peculiar calling to address whatever it is that they're supposed to address. And so with them, it really was about ridding the South of de jure, which is by law, segregation. And they were effective at that. There's no place that I know of in the South that has legal segregation that's supported by law. Now, do we have de facto and practices and behaviors toward that? Of
yes.
course. And that's what we're contending with in a lot of respects. But at least they were strategic enough to know that we had to get some laws changed on the books if we're going to maneuver and be able to operate within the mainstream of culture. Because to operate outside of it is one thing, which maybe we could have opted to be just a community unto ourselves. But I'm not sure how far that would go in a world that continued to become more interconnected and more interrelated.
Yes, exactly.
So, as Daddy said, because of that, we have to learn how to live together as brothers and sisters, or together we'll be forced to perish as fools.
Yes.
So this work is so important, what you're talking about. So, thank you for doing that. And, hopefully more people will begin to do the work of, determining those strengths.
Absolutely.
But also, once that determination is made, to really organize those strengths into
Yes,
a strategic plan.
yes,
A strategic plan for social justice is critical right now.
yes. Well, as you know, we've had, Mark Morial, Derek Johnson, Dwayne Crawford from Noble, all a part of this series of where do we go from here? And, really that bringing you all together was the goal, to say, how can we come together? How can the legacy organizations, in addition to some of, the newer social justice organizations, to really chart out, that strategic plan? I believe everybody knows and is realizing now more than ever that we have to work together. And I mean, who would have thought that we would have the synergy right, that we have right now that has come about as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And we have to figure out a way to do that. So, as I've mentioned to them, and they said that they're interested, I want to encourage you and to see how we can all come together along with, others to figure out, how we can complement to build upon each other's strengths and support the individual missions of each organization, as well as create that collective vision to move us all forward in this digital age that we're living in.
Right.
you know,
Right.
Pooling our resources and together in order to advance the change is critical. And kind of having, um, people have been saying like, well, we haven't had, a leader, real strong leader since Dr. King. And we haven't been able to have that, that one voice, but there are multiple voices, that are, available, but we should have at least a three-pronged plan, that we can all work
And
towards.
one of the things that Dr. King brought to the movement was he was the spokesperson. So messaging and
Yes,
language is very important,
yes,
particularly in a virtual world, because otherwise your narrative changes.
yes,
So part of the strategy is sitting down and coming up with strategy around language and
yes,
messaging,
yes,
and then the who, the what, where, when, and how in that. Because those voices have to be aligned. Now, you don't literally have to say the same exact words in the script,
right,
but the meaning of what you're saying, the
yes,
messaging that is going out has to be the same. And I think that's one of the problems we're having today, because everybody is we've all been trained in a system of individualism. And that individualism, unfortunately, is not good for a group of
no,
people who are a smaller percentage of the population and have had barriers and oppressions and systemic issues to hold them back and hold them down. And so it's even more critical now than ever before
yes,
that we really create that strategic plan around messaging as well as a part of the larger strategic plan and the who in that. Because when you come against that the opposition is not always an adversary. It can just be some people who have a different opinion who can
yes,
also kind of confuse what the real message is. And then there has to
absolutely. We see
be
that going on every day,
constantly.
but
Yeah,
especially right now, right?
and then there has to be, strategy around priorities, because
Yes,
we cannot conquer everything. As much as, I want to remind everyone that my father had such a heart and a passion for addressing social injustices, and lived at a time when most of what we are contending with today existed. They were dealing with police brutality. Growing up, he had witnessed it himself as a
yes,
child. They were dealing with disenfranchisement, in terms of voting. They were dealing with economic hardships and inequities and injustices. But there was this strategy as to how to tackle all of that, and where do you start? Now, does it suggest in this time that we have to just do one? Maybe not,
no,
but we also have to be careful that we're not overtaxed,
yes,
that our efforts to try to address too many undermines our ability to be effective at bringing about substantial change and having
yes,
a victory. What was important about Montgomery was what it did to the spirits of those that were a part of it, what it did to their self-esteem, and what it did to their belief and hope that things could change because they had a victory. And
yes,
right now, we need a victory
we
to
do.
uplift our spirits, to give us
Yes,
hope that things can and will change.
yes,
Otherwise, we're going to get more frustrated. We're going to see more problems within our streets, more destruction, because people want to see real progress and change.
Yeah. That one victory, do you think that there's some low hanging fruit, if you will, of, something that we could all rally around right here, right now, that would give us the victory? Now, we know there's a presidential election going on. Aside from that, because we know how critical that is, and that's different work, as it relates to, equity and social justice. And it's a huge question. We will continue to unpack this, over time. That's that strategy work that we're talking about. But is there anything that, just comes to mind right now? Maybe a couple of things that you think should be that some of the things we should consider as that number one priority.
Well, first of all, I'm not convinced that we necessarily have low-hanging fruit, because low-hanging fruit suggests that, it's something that's right here, and if we just do this, that, and the other, we will see some instant adjustment. Because we put so much off for so long, I think we have harder.
It is hard work.
Yes, harder work in terms of unraveling some things.
Right.
I've always wrestled with,
let's look at baby steps.
I've always wrestled with, where do you start? Do you start with the educational system? Do you start, a lot of people feel like reparations is a cure-all, but I'm still, my issue is, if we don't deal with the systemic issues, no matter what we wrestle with, the system is still in place.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that may sound a little far-fetched, and I won't say it's low-hanging fruit, but it certainly is prime, I think.
Well, let's scratch the low-hanging fruit. Just a good first step.
Well, I think we've spent a lot of energy in my father's time and up until this time with putting a lot of emphasis and stress on government and government responsibility. And I am not suggesting that we back off from that.
Right.
But I am suggesting that we add an extra responsibility to corporate America.
Absolutely.
Corporate America really runs the United States of America.
Yes.
If you think about who is in Washington, every time they are gathered, they're corporate lobbyists that are being paid by these corporations. We've got to have an agenda to go to them, to get them to commit. And we have to decide what it is. What are the 4, 5, 7 or whatever policies that are important for our community to see some significant changes, and get them behind it. They have to make a policy commitment to the social justice community.
Yes.
I know that the Delta CEO has started speaking in that regard. And so that one corporation that I know of, it's important that he become a leader in that regard in terms of appealing to his peers. And we have to figure out how to put that necessary responsibility where it lies. It may mean, at some point, that we're their consumers. I mean, we have to study, where is our largest consumer base? What corporations do we serve as the largest consumer base? That if they don't do,
how about media and entertainment?
Where's the largest? Well, first of all, we need to find out who are the most outside of the NRA right now. Who are the most, they included though, but outside, because we know that they're present. Who are the major lobbyists in Washington, D.C.? We need that list, okay? Yes. And we because we need to see, part of the reason this legislation that has damaged our community did not pass is because these set of senators who these lobbyists have supported is the reason why. Yeah. So these lobbyists who represent these corporate interests. So it's not, we can't look for easy. That's what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I think people want to look for the Rosa Parks on the bus. Let's rally this 381 day boycott together and let the lawyers work on the court system like they did with Rosa Parks and others going up to the Supreme Court and get a Supreme Court ruling that they can never again treat us like that on buses. If they do, we have a greater legal recourse on our side. It's not going to happen quite that way.
And part of the reason I even framed it that way is we know it's hard to get people engaged. So if we can get them engaged in something that, where they can do something, see, some synergy and momentum that will keep them coming back, to do more. But
I agree.
Again, the strategy work that you talked about, is so critical. And what you said about, engaging corporate America and holding them accountable, it's critical. And there really needs to be a cross-sector approach to the strategy.
There is so much that corporate America can do to help transform a lot of what we're talking about, from adopting schools in these low performing communities, making sure that those schools have what they need from a technological perspective, the pressure on making sure that we have different curriculum working, saying to the Department of Education or whatever, that, we are investing in a new team of curriculum developers that will now bring into
to make us competitive globally.
Right. But that the true story and history of America that reflects all of our contributions is a part of that it doesn't have to be so Eurocentric in its approach, our curriculum all the way around. I mean, not just in literature, but in science. I mean, the whole nine. Again, it's going to be one step at a time, and I hate I hate to put pressure on my home company, Delta, but he's kind of opened up the way with a couple of the commitments that he's made, and we need to mine that field.
Let's see how we can, spend some time, because it takes one, right? And if he makes an effort and is willing to make a stand and do something, and then be able to hold other of his peers accountable and to join in, that's how it begins. That's how change begins to happen. So he wouldn't have made this statement.
There's just so much legislation out there that, golly.
Oh, yes.
And we have to supervise that legislation, because one thing we're good at is getting it passed. We're not good at supervising and ensuring that it meets the outcomes for which it was passed for. So that's another part of the strategy. Who are the entities that are going to supervise, its process to the outcome? Who's going to measure it? Who's going to make sure it's fulfilling what it needs to fulfill?
Yes. Well, I know we're running out of time, but I would like to know how we can all support, you, the work at the King Center. If there's any special campaign or anything that you're doing right now that we can support. If you're involved with anything on Friday at the March on Washington, just kind of give us a summary of those things, and we can let you guys. I know you've got another meeting.
We're doing three things right now. We're doing our Nonviolence 365 education and training, which includes eradicating racism as part of it. It has included an element called cultural humility. And then now we're going to do a deeper dive into nonviolence in terms of the thinking, because a lot of this change is going to come through a different way of thinking now. We can't think in our old way. I think it was Albert Einstein that said we can't solve problems on the same level of thinking that they were created. So we got to change the thinking. So people can look for that. We'll be posting on social media about those sessions. We're doing our beloved community talks where we're tackling different issues about what corporations can do, reparations, having a conversation around corporations, faith community and its responsibility.
Yes.
I forget the other conversation. So that's another thing. The final thing on the March on Washington, I will not. I made a conscious decision not to go to DC because of COVID-19.
Yes.
I opt to be on the safe side for me right now, because I know
Absolutely.
our numbers are pretty high in Georgia, and because of
Yes.
the factors that I have, flying and then staying in a hotel and then being out amongst crowd, that's a
It's
lot
risky.
to contend with. It's very risky
It
for
is.
me. So I will support it in spirit, and obviously will be watching. But shortly after it, that evening, we're doing a beloved community talk around women and their leadership in the movement, because in 57, in honor of the anniversary of the March on Washington, because women were left out. So we will have a conversation with Merle Evers, for instance. She was scheduled to speak. We want to know more about that story, because a lot of people don't know that.
Yes.
Why wasn't she there to deliver that speech? I think Daisy Bates shared her comments, but no women really had a prominent role and position in the March on Washington. So we'll talk about that and talk about today and how women have been stepping up, in terms of, I won't even be saying stepping up. Women are now
We've already
being
been there.
recognized.
Exactly.
Recognized. Let's say that.
We're being
recognized, because the bottom line is, you all, when the movement
Yes.
started in Montgomery, it was women who suggested the boycott.
Yes.
The Women's Political Action Council
Yes.
were the ones who suggested the boycott. It wasn't my father.
Wow.
It wasn't.
You better speak.
God, I'm looking at them right now. Edie Nixon. It was the women. They were looking. They were being strategic. They were looking at the prime time to hold this boycott. They were trying to do it, but it was like not quite right yet. But all the things kind of added up. When Mrs. Park sat down, they felt like the community would rally at this point. Dr. King was in town. He was a new leader. He didn't have anything on him at that time. So, let's connect him. And the mood and the idea and the spirit of the time was right, because we just had Emmett Till. Claudette Colvin had been arrested on the bus. And so this was like the takeoff moment. And so we were there, just not recognized. We were there in strategy. My mother was in strategy sessions. Juanita Abernathy shared how she was in strategy sessions. But people don't know that. Women were influential. They were the ones who handed out the flyers, or were the social media communicators of the time. They were the ones to help with the transportation system.
Okay.
So that people could get around. I mean, they were there throughout in the sit-ins when they were sitting at those lunch counters. Ella Baker working with SNCC. In fact, she was working with SELC at the time that all that took off. And my father actually gave her money to go and help to get those students organized, because he recognized the effectiveness was going to be in a more structured way, as opposed to all organic, which they were doing at the time, which is kind of where we are today. There are organizations created, but now it's back to then when they created the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. How do we create coordination among the different student or young people or millennial organizations and efforts? So so Friday at 6:00 on our Facebook page, the King Center, we will be honoring and recognizing the movement, the March on Washington, with the role of women, meaning where were women as a part of this, and why weren't they as visible as they should have been, and how women now have emerged to that place of visibility, and an important place, because as my mom said, women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe you must become its soul. We are the soul of the nation.
Absolutely. And Hollywood is doing a special tribute as well that day, a project called Tears, where a lot of the people from Hollywood are coming in and kind of sharing, their experiences with social justice and things that we can do. So there's a lot going on. I'd love to share what's going on and help stream it live on our platform, and we'll, get out whatever information you have promoting what's going on. And I do look forward to continuing this conversation so that, we can continue strategize. And I'd love to share that information with you about StrengthsFinder offline. And we have a good friend here in LA, Donahue Tuitt, who told me to tell you
Oh,
hello.
yes. I love Donahue. Tell him I
Yes.
said hi.
Yeah, he doesn't do social media, but he said he was going to watch this. So
Oh,
I was going to tell
okay.
you
Well,
that
then,
backstage. And
hey,
so,
Donahue. Yes,
right. So another champion, for this
he
work,
definitely is.
and
Yes,
a partner. And I'm just so grateful for him and all that he does. And I was so glad to hear that he was doing work with you too. So we'll
yes,
definitely
indeed.
continue, strategizing, plotting, and planning, and figure out, the next steps and bringing folks together.
All right.
All
I'm
righty.
in.
Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thank you,
All
Kelly. I
righty.
appreciate you.
I
Okay.
appreciate you. Take care.
Take care.
God. Bye bye. Oh, wow. I am so glad that we were able to do this today. Again, this is a conversation that we have been scheduling for quite a bit. And thank you for your patience earlier. We know things happen. So, next week, we are going to have our rescheduled conversation around where do we go from here with other national women leaders, Dr. Janetta Cole and Janice Mathis of the National Council of Negro Women, and a lot of other exciting things coming ahead. But make sure you continue to tune into our page this week. We will have quite a bit of announcements going on of how you can tune in to some of the March on Washington activities in your city, locally, in LA, nationally. Uh, so make sure you tune in for some of those announcements to plug in. And there are activities going on all throughout the week. So just stay plugged in, and we will be in touch. And we thank you for making, these past 7 years. What they've been, and we're happy to be where we are now, and engaging in the strategies that we plan to when at the onset of the organization, because it's been all about collaborating and cross-sector collaboration and strategizing for social justice in ways that have existed, and ensuring that media and entertainment is at the table. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you. We hope that you have a good and blessed week. Take care. And we'll see you throughout the week at the March on Washington activities, and if not, on Friday. Take care.